Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our life writing workshop with Tony Wailey. Life writing is more than a family tree. It is bringing the past to life, putting onto the page the dreams, adventures, conflicts, and moments of beauty from someone's life. Be it memoirs, letters, biographies, diaries, or even blogs, life writing lets us share the stories of those that have been forgotten from the page. We hope you're excited for this workshop and it sends you down a journey of your own life and the intersecting moments that makes it magical. Having worked on books like The Little Woods Pool Girls, Radical Practice in Liverpool, and Bess, which was the first book published by a Liverpool-born Black woman, we've seen firsthand the importance life writing can have. Real lives and stories that without the form would have sunk into the murky depths of history are now able to be shared across the world, and their incredible achievements given the full celebration they deserve. Taking you on this adventure down life writing, all for Tony Wailey, who's written 8 books exploring the cosmopolitan nature of the maritime city. His latest work, Diary of the Smith Whaleys and Dada, explored the context of place in narrative history. And so, without further ado, let's get this workshop going, and I'd like to welcome Tony Wailey.
Hi everyone, I'm Tony Wailey, and I'm here to talk about a life writing workshop which concerns the book I published in October last year, 2020, entitled The Diary of the Smith Whaleys. But I want to talk over this workshop about 4 or 5 distinct periods, not in time, but in terms of the Liverpool waterfront, specifically the North End Liverpool waterfront, where my family were from, all from Bootle. And the first thing that I want to say, I guess, is the huge amounts of population that were caught in these districts along the waterfront. For example, in the Dingle had a population the size of Barnsley. Bootle was bigger than Blackburn and Darwin put together. So these districts were huge sort of waterfront areas. And the poet Derek Mahan talks about such little houses, such enormous skies. So the first part of the workshop is to describe these crowded places. The second part, I guess, is the second section is about place and memory, which of course features largely in life writing in terms of memoirs, biographies, autobiographies, essays, even blogs and emails collections. So I want to talk about the notion of memory. And then I'll give a couple of readings from the book just to sort of show you where I'm coming from in terms of trying to locate the book in terms of not only of literature, the great authors that have written about these, but also about how my family figure into a social and cultural framework, which I suppose is the centerpiece of this workshop. And the workshop is about context. And that is something that is largely missing from the singular disembodied journeys of my lost long family or my DNA journey. That's not to say they are not relevant, but what is lacking from my perspective is a sense of context. And so I want to talk about that and bring it to the fore when I move on to the workshop itself, and in trying to sort of get yourselves to start to write about these journeys, and I will give you some building blocks that I think will help you. By the way, before we get further into the workshop, if you have a pen to hand, I know it's slightly passé, but if you have a pen to hand, it would be handy because I won't be putting up graphs or tables. I'll just be talking. So um, a pen would be useful when I go through the characteristics and asking you to write some words to each of those characteristics. Um, and then, then I suppose I want to sort of get you to sort of put that together as a block and then think of it as a story, as if you were writing a story. And that would be the best example I could give you of a life writing workshop, whereby you come away from this 40 minutes talk and thinking, well, yes, I've got some sort of tools in order to go about this. Um, and the just to come to the notion of the conclusion um, of the workshop, uh, we want to sort of talk about where you can place your writing in relation to writing on the wall, but we also want to talk about the context of what the past means, whether it's safely locked away in the past, whether it informs the present, or as the poet Anna October suggests, the past lies rotting in the future. So these are some of the ideas I want to pick up on. These are some of the ideas that I want to explore with you. And as I've mentioned, life writing is a collection of memories, experiences, your own, others, your mother and father, your cousins, siblings, etc. Um, Memoirs, diaries, letters, testimonials. Uh, my purpose here is reconstructing family history. Um, Now, I suppose because I was brought up by parents who themselves were adopted and who incidentally didn't know they were adopted until a rather dramatic event where my auntie tried to burn the house down with all of us inside it. That's another story, but it gives some example of where I was to uh, direct my search um, much later in life. So the Diary of the Smith Whaleys is almost a reconstruction of those lives that have already passed away many years since. Um, and also, but I want to sort of talk about Liverpool and that waterfront of Liverpool as almost an elsewhere city. Indeed, the whole city, if you want to make the point, in the sense that everybody is for most people, everyone is from somewhere else here. And I think that plays into very much the idea of place and memory. Um, and I think in some respects, it's interesting about writers, including myself, writing about place. Um, some of the best writers, if you think of Lewis Grassic Gibbon, A Scots Quair, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, um, uh, Anna Maria Schur, microfictions, Desmond Hogan from Ireland with his short stories. They've always written their short stories elsewhere, somewhere else. And it leads you to think about what the great Argentinian poet Jose Luis Borges talks about. If you want to write about uh, Buenos Aires, write about New York. If you want to write about Dublin, write about Liverpool. If you want to write about New York, imagine somewhere else. And what he was trying to suggest was he was trying to sort of put a mirror between yourself and your writing. to get away from the exact immediacy of what impinges upon you. I suppose myself now back in Liverpool after being many years, 25 years I think in London, even though I was here every weekend. 25 years in London, 3 years in Barcelona, going away to sea for 5 years, going on the road for 5 years. I suppose I myself have accumulated that sense of being away, even though I love where I am and where I come from. So it's that sort of place, memory, distance that I'm also encouraging in life writing, rather than, I was born at a very young age. Um, and when I talk about these huge populations of the waterfront, I still sort of laugh at that fact of uh, schoolboy football or under 11 football. Liverpool still holds the record for attendance. Almost 12,000 people attended Anfield Stadium in 1951 between a local cup final between St Anthony's and St Sylvester's on Scotland Road. So it gives you some sort of sense of dimension of what we're talking about. And indeed, it was only Mumbai in India in 2000 that exceeded the density of the Liverpool waterfront between 1850 to 1950. So it shows you how people were absolutely packed in. And from out of that arose such dramatic lives, if you wish, such dramatic lives. Again, to go back to Derek Mann's lines, such tiny houses, such enormous skies. Um, so I mentioned about memory and place, but what happened? What happens if that place is shifting, like in Liverpool, like the amount of people going away, coming and going? Uh, the place is not fixed, and so you get place and memory much more to the fore in studies of emigration when people think of home. So where is home in Liverpool? I suppose I want to pose the question, and I want to pose the question to you about where is home in Liverpool for you. And I will give you some sort of ideas about that, especially in terms of your thinking, feeling, remembering, um, but more, I suppose, as you go from yourself to your city, to your district, to your local ward. Again, we've got an ocean on our doorstep, to the wider world, of which Liverpool is synonymous. Um, so it's those interactions between home, community, the individual, but going beyond the individual. Um, all writing is conflict between yourself and the page, between yourself and others, and it's out of that conflict that comes context, and you're using yourself as a mirror in that context. Um, so what happens then when that place, that memory and place are shifting? What happens to that landscape? Is it a seascape in Liverpool? And of course, it's memory plays tricks on us as well. And then, of course, because a number of commentators, because the mind wants to own, wants to place, wants to love. Um, uh, Obviously, in terms of traumatic incidents, people sometimes forget, wipe away. Um, so this is interesting in terms of uh, locate where we locate memory and place. Um, and I quote here now from the writer Ian Malavey. Is it enough to rummage through the rusted fragments of our childhood memories, to drill beyond the surface of our local community into ever thickening reservoirs of history and culture? Um, well, it is enough. It is enough. But what I think he's suggesting is you have to try to go beyond the personal testimony, if that's not a contradiction in terms in life writing. Um, I personally believe Jeff Young, in a marvelous book, Ghost Town, published recently, about his growing up in Liverpool, uh, uses that mirror by using different writers that have commented upon Liverpool and how he himself reinvents his own journey. Um, Rose Thomas, in her novel Bess, talks about moving from Liverpool 8 to London and reimagining it when she returns, writing a marvelous novel. So it's that sort of mirror that I'm encouraging you to think about, um, when, like um, like Henry Bergson suggests about time, uh, the will the will to dream, but within certain boundaries. Uh, and don't forget, in Liverpool, we are a tidal people. Um, I think that's important. Um, so when I ask you to sort of do these building blocks, to make these building blocks, I'm asking you really to create a form of atmosphere. Um, and I'll suggest how that atmosphere can be built, if I may. And I'll just do a little bit of reading from the book, which will hopefully encourage you to see some of the points that I've made. Uh, I'm talking here about my great grandfather, George Alexander Willey. And I quote here now. When George Alexander Wailey entered New York Harbor as an able bodied seaman on the decks of the Liverpool ship City of Richmond in 1876, he signed the Aliens Crew List Register, not as an English national, but Irish. This is not altogether surprising. Although living in Liverpool over 30 years, both he and his parents were from Ireland. He was brought up in a heavily Irish and dual heritage neighbourhood in the middle of Liverpool's sailor town, the North End. And the seamen he was working with came mostly from the North End and consistently returned some years later an Irish nationalist member of Parliament, T.P. O'Connor. Liverpool was a city soaked in water and blood, born between slavery and famine, and like its river, always subject to the tide of different identities. A city that has an ocean on the doorstep, and because of movement, could always imagine itself as being somewhere else. Um, Now, that notion of being somewhere else also appealed to the great writer of Moby Dick, Herman Melville, when he wrote about his third book entitled Redburn, published in 1849. It was about his trip to Liverpool the year previous as an apprentice cabin boy on a sailing ship entering the port. He recounts the adventures of a refined youth among the excitement of coarse and brutal sailors and the waterfront areas of the city they explored. He wrote the manuscript in less than 10 weeks, such was his passion for the subject. His fellow American sailors loved Liverpool with as much gusto as to savour its 90 gin palaces, roughly, along the 300-yard strip of Paradise Street. Melville was appalled at the levels of poverty, far worse than in New York and around the city centre docks. Appalled, fascinated, and excited. Why was there so much dancing amidst so much poverty? Why did the poor docker not go to work, when there was work for him just because he had worked all night 3 days before? Why was there so much music and markets selling everything a person could wish for amidst so much unhappiness and misery? He recalled his fellow sailors aboard ship, stripped bare, robbed, degraded by drink, muck, and disease, strewn along these poor streets. Yet back at sea, talking about their love of the city, he could overhear them yearning across clear blue water what lay between them and their desperate haunts. They loved their Liverpool, he wrote. This is the notion of elsewhere that I was trying to sort of impart. The book goes on to talk about the 28 members of the Smith Wailey family, and each one of them has a small biography, not only about their personal biography, but what was happening in the city, and that takes place on the extra page. I'll just give you a snippet. This is about George Wailey Jr., who was his father's second son. George Alexander Wailey and Caroline Brown had 5 sons and 2 daughters. George Wailey, born Liverpool 1871, baptised at Holy Cross, Scotland Road in the June. In 1890, he sails on the Cork Shipping Company, Irish coastal vessels, the Blarney and the Glavin, in 2 years between 1890 and 92. He joins the Oxenholme, a Liverpool emigrant ship that runs between the city and Canada. In 1892, 1895, works as both a seaman and docker. In 1896, joins the King's Regiment and deserts 3 months later of the same year, goes missing in Ireland. I give you that snippet because I want to quote Overleaf, where I talk more about the culture of the city. George, like many other seamen and casual workers, shifted in and out of employment between the sea and the docks as they lived their lives amongst the range of occupations offered by the port. It was always likely that their ways of thinking and acting should be felt well outside the boundary of the workplace. Seamen slaughtered themselves as free men, even if the rhetoric did not always meet the reality. There were 208,000 British seamen during this period, and even 30 years later, Caradoc Jones' survey of Merseyside, which took place in 1934, found that between 3,000 and 5,000 seamen a year still moved between ship and quayside to work. So we're talking about a very much a working population that knew more of New York than it did of Norwich, or more of Boston and Baltimore than Bolton, Bury and Blackburn. Once again, I'm trying to contextualize place. So in some ways, what I'm asking you is to try to sort of create an atmosphere with these building blocks of categories and words that I'm going to give you. I'm recognizing that conflict is at the center of this. Conflict is the center of this in terms of any activity that involves writing. And here's possibly where you need a pen, because I'll give you 10 or more categories of which you can list down, and I want you to write at first 20 words to each category, and then I want you to build up in your own time, obviously, to 50 words, and even if you can get to 100, but 50 is certainly plenty in order to impart your thoughts. And just listen to these categories and hopefully they'll make sense to you. Street, pub, school, cinema, shops, work, home, parents, siblings, church, river, sea, ocean. About 14 categories there. Try and write 20 words to each. Try and write them and try and build it up. And then you could possibly link this to wider concepts such as illness, resilience, fraternity, solitary, spirit, skill, faith, discipline, power. So you've got very much specific characteristics with more tangential ones, more loose concepts of which you can sort of try and place together. And if you do this, if you do straight away, you will have a couple of 100 words, even with the 20 words. If you write to sort of the 50 and the 100 words, you will have a couple of thousand words. So it's those building blocks that's important. Now, when you've got those words together alongside their characteristics, number them 1 to 14, like I've given you there. Number them, and then try and fit, almost like a jigsaw, what works with what. Does 1 go with 8? Does 4 go with 14? Does 5 go with 9? And you're starting to discern then a notion of possible theme, what you want to write about concerning life history. So in some ways, you're building up a picture. You're building up a storyline. Now, like every storyline, character drives the plot. Even if that character is a street, it drives the plot. You might want to start your storyline with something different. You're writing about a street, for example, but why not suggest, like Tony Soprano, I picked up a dead rat today. Straight away, the reader, the audience is into something unusual. Or Albert Camus, mother died today, or was it yesterday? And you have that whole sense of ambivalence in terms of driving a plot. Choose a title. When you're messing around with these blocks, choose a title. That may help you direct where you want to put the juxtaposed pieces together. And most importantly, after a theme starts to emerge, after a character starts to emerge, try to wrap up your little story. Only takes 1 or 2 lines. Try to sort of wrap it up, and straight away you will have a form in front of you. You will have a form. You will have what sculptors call their block of wood that you can chip away, that you can extend, that you can pull down. It's only a small piece of work, so it's not like as if you're writing a novel whereby, you know, 1 chapter doesn't work, you're kicking down a wall and have to resurrect different walls. So this is what I'm encouraging you to do, and this is what I'm encouraging you to actually think about in constructing out of those blocks of words associated with characteristics a story forming. A story forming that has a title, that has a character, that drives the plot, and in the finish leads you to wrapping up the theme. And in that way, you are establishing context. And context in this life writing exercise is extremely necessary. Otherwise, you can get lost in memory and place and personal identity. You need some anchors, as it were. And don't forget, an anchor is not a stasis point either. Anchors turn with the tide. They're just holding one um, artifact, in this case a ship, uh, in place, but not without movement, not without movement. And of course, if nothing else, Liverpool is a place of movement. Liverpool is a place of elsewhere. And no writer wants to sort of write something and just have it for a top drawer. Um, wow, Writing on the Wall run a number of writing invitations throughout the year, whether it's Write to Work, or whether it's Pulp Idle, or whether it's the Writer's Block, always encouraging writers to submit their work, writers to go on these courses, writers to get feedback, etc. And in this way, uh, you will get stronger, you will get better, and more importantly, you will have more of an idea of how you absolutely sort of fix the point of your story, because it will be a story by then. It will be a story by then. From those basic building blocks, you will emerge with a story. Um, so, just to sort of recap um, about throwing in tangential concepts such as power, control, discipline, all of our lives have featured aspects, both positive and negative, of this. So when you go back and polish, you will find that these collections of words associated with a characteristic turn into a mini story themselves. So you'll have basically a series of mini stories. And that is important as well in building up the sort of the lacquering, as it were, of your original intent. Um, as I say, they don't have to run consecutively. You're mixing them up one against the other. And remember, um, life writing is not so much about putting words down on paper. It's a process and a context, a key and a mirror about remembering, feeling, but more importantly, shaping your experience. And in some respect, shaping your experience only can come using that mirror outside of yourself, outside of that yourself. And I think I want to give just a last reading now, um, uh, in the sense that to try to sort of to show what problems and surprises that will always be in store for you when you embark on such life writing exercises. Um, I spent an awful long time in Australia researching, simply because some of my dead relatives uh, uh, jumped ship there. And I was keen to sort of go round all the ports that they sailed out of Liverpool originally, and then jumped ship and led um, lives there, um, or so I thought. Uh, it was on my last day, and this is talking about young George, born in 1871, that I recounted earlier. It was on my last day at the State Library in Sydney, with sunlight in all of the cross streets, that I came across a small box of documents concerning the loss of life at sea in the Royal Navy, but with even smaller section given over to merchantmen. It was there that I found out that great uncle George had died not in a market town of New South Wales, a contented old man after a lifetime of going away, but murdered in a brawl on a quayside in Bahia Blanca, Argentina, at the age of 30 in 1900. So you can imagine what I felt. I've been tracking this guy that, through South Australia, Albany, Port Adelaide. I tracked all of the sorts of censors, but the censors have been taking the name down wrong. So be prepared for surprises in life writing. Be prepared to open these boxes, which involves you personally, but also your relatives, your aspects of the past. And in doing that, hopefully, what this workshop has tried to engage with is the inner and outer processes of thinking, feeling, knowing, inner outer senses of place, inner outer relationship with others, in a city constantly known for movement, inner and outer stories, both objective and subjective. Whenever you think you're being objective, you'll turn a corner into subjectivity. And that's correct. And that's correct. But try to sort of establish the post of objectivity first. Inner and outer, pasts and futures. This is the context of life writing. And this is the context of what I want to try and leave you with. In the sense that, if I can find my place, yes, there we are. In the sense that, here's a small poem for you, based on when I was trying to put this workshop together. And as you can see from my stack of papers, I've left out half the stuff I wanted to say about memory, but that would take us down too many streets. This poem is called The Reading. Each year makes me a liar. Will anyone see the gaps between my hair? Sometimes just a little shove draws out heaven's scheme. Even for this tiny book, terribly hard chairs still make it seem I can redeem myself here. Get up with a shrug. What about my teeth? Grace comes with a rug. Act like I don't care. Scrubbed, sparkling clean. I wade through cyber air. This library's my new bud. It might rescue everything. Rise each tide and flood. It's only fair. When evening turns green, you take what you can, even from our dreams. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's given some semblance of how you build and construct life writing yourselves. Good luck with everything, and don't forget all of those writing opportunities offered by Writing on the Wall. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Tony. That was an absolutely fascinating workshop, and I hope everyone's been able to get loads of interesting work out of that, because I know that I definitely have. If you're interested in Tony's work and would like to see more, you can get his book, The Diary of the Smith Whaleys, from News from Nowhere, an independent radical bookshop. So you can find that online or on Bold Street, and you can get all of his books and a lot of books from our festival from there as well. I'd like to thank our funders for being able to make this workshop possible, the Institute of the Creative Enterprise at Edge Hill University, Arts Council England, and the Liverpool City Council. If you'd like to support WOW, we do accept donations to be able to keep stuff like this festival going. If you go on our website, you'll be able to find out that. And you'll also receive a monitoring form in your emails. If you can fill that out and get that back to us, that's really important. It lets us continue to do work like this, and it also gives us a better idea of the audiences that we're catering towards. And if you're interested in the festival, this is just really the start. We still have so many more events to come, and we can't wait, and we'd love to see you there. If Tony here has given you a little bit of an appetite for life writing, then he's got a panel discussion with Jeff Young on life writing on the 26th of May at 6 p.m. And I know that I'll definitely be there because it was very exciting and I'd love to hear more. We've also got the book launches of The Little Woods Pool Girls, that's on the 17th of May at 7:30, and also Radical Practice in Liverpool at 7:30 on the 26th of May. And we've got a whole host of guests still to come. Ben Ockley's going to be here, Alif Shafat's going to be here, Ken Loach is still going to be here, Steve Bell's going to be here, and we've also got Jon Snow coming on to today, which is the Wednesday, the 12th of May. Still so much more to come. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at more WildFest events, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.